Well, hello, avid readers of Christian fiction. I'm Trisha Goyer, and I'm so glad to be here with Tracy Fredrychowski. And I said her name right, Fredkowski. Tracy,
Frederick
thank you.
Frederickowski.
Fredakowski, getting
Mhm.
close. I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello there, Tricia. Thank you so much for having me on your live today. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about Emma's Amish Faith Tested and a little bit about myself. I live in South Carolina. I'm a transplant from northwestern Pennsylvania, where I grew up on a little farm
Mm,
surrounded in deep in Amish country, hence why I write Amish fiction. I actually grew up with the Amish. I've worked with them. I used to, my bedroom window, our house, my parents' house sat close to the road, and my alarm clock was the buggies passing my house on their way to the working at the lumber yard. So I have a very wholesome background.
mm.
Um, like I said, I grew up in farming country in northwestern Pennsylvania and just have a true passion for the simpler way of life. And when I decided I wanted to start writing, there was no other option for me other than to write what I knew, and Amish is what I know. So that's a little bit about me. My husband and I have two children and four grandchildren and some chickens and a dog, and we live in upstate South Carolina, where it's nice and balmy. When I left Pennsylvania, I left the cold and never wanted to go back. But I
I
do,
know.
but I do miss my roots. I do miss that area. In every book I write, you will get a sense of what northwestern Pennsylvania is all about between the pages. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love that so much. And I think you could tell definitely in your books that you grew up in that community. And
Mhm.
like I think so many times, um, sometimes reading Amish fiction, I'm sure you're like, well, it's not really like that, but it's you can tell in your stories that it is true to life. And I love that that was your alarm clock, hearing those buggy wheels going
Mhm.
over. And I think that's just so much. I want to dig into that a little bit more in a minute, but we're talking about your book, which is Emma's Amish Faith Tested, and it's part of the Amish Women of Lawrence County series. And this is book one in the
It
series.
is.
So, yay, exciting. I love when we have series, have lots
Mhm.
of books. So, tell us just the brief story behind this book.
Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about the series, and then
Okay,
you'll get a feeling for the book.
perfect.
The Amish Women of Lawrence County is a series of 10 books. So Emma was book one, Rebecca just launched, she's book two, and then Anna's coming out in August, and there will be ten books in all, and they're all about one of one of 10 women of this little Amish
Mm,
community called Willow Springs. And when I decided to write this series, I wanted to approach women's issues. So I will tell you right off the bat, these are not typical boy meet girls. I'm sorry, girl meets boy. Happily
well,
ever after
sometimes the boy
stories.
meets girl first.
Yeah,
It's
it
okay.
does. It does. And while I love great Amish fiction romance, every one of these stories will have a romance element, but the true purpose and the true
Mm,
message in each one of these stories is how these 10 women are going to turn to Jesus to help them through some of life's most challenging circumstances. So in Emma's story, her and her husband, Samuel, have just been married and they suffer a great loss. And Emma is just beside herself. She finds no relief in anything. Her old order ways really give her no comfort. She's supposed to put a smile on her face and just move on.
mhm.
Well, after a great loss, it's hard to put a smile on your face and just move on because the pain is so raw. So in Emma's story, I really get into the heart and soul of this young, newly married woman and how her and Samuel have to maneuver through a new marriage. Well, they've suffered a great loss. And she has to turn to Jesus. And
Mhm.
in their old order ways, that's not
Yeah.
acceptable.
Yeah.
So, in this particular series, The Amish Women of Lawrence County, this particular old order community is going to undergo a great shift in what they believe.
Mm.
So I'm bringing some of that to light. So I call this series Real, Raw, and Relatable. So there's women's issues,
Yeah.
like I said, Emma's story is of great loss. Rebecca, which is book 2, she's a snarky little sassy girl who is completely opposite of what you would typically find in an Amish story. And when you first start reading Rebecca, you are not going to like that girl. I can tell you, you are not going to like her. But toward the end of the book,
Mm.
she finds redemption in a new way of believing in God's word. So, without giving too much of Emma's story away, my first series, which is The Secrets of Willow Springs, I introduce Emma as a 16-year-old. And now Emma in the Amish Women of Lawrence County, she is now in her early 20s, and she's married to her childhood sweetheart. And they have to maneuver life in a new way that is the complete opposite of their strict old order upbringing.
Yeah.
So,
I love
without
that.
giving too much away,
Yeah.
it's not a typical Amish romance.
Hmm.
It's an Amish romance with heartache, real challenges, real situations that each one of us have had to face in one way or the other. And it's all about helping Emma see the path to her righteousness, or the path to her healing is found in Jesus. So
Oh, I
there you
love
go.
that. And I love how, um, you know, talking about the Amish ways, and often, and you alluded to this, they handle things differently. So you're talking about this great loss that she faces in researching some of my Amish books. It's like, well, they just say, this bad thing happened, and then the next day you just move on, like it never happened. And I'm like talking to my friends, like, how are you expected to do that? So I love that you're able to step into this community, step into the heart of these characters, and really help us see that even though there's expectations, and I think no matter where we live, I've lived in California, I've lived in Montana, I'm in Arkansas. Um, Sometimes the outward surroundings, this is how you handle things. In Montana, you just roll up your sleeves and you tackle the weather, tackle the wildlife, tackle whatever. I mean, just it's so different in different areas. And then you add the culture, the Amish culture, and there's these expectations that are there that aren't even biblical, because I'm glad that you're bringing up that she
Mhm.
has to turn to Jesus. They're not even biblical, but through the characters and through the growth, you see that all of us face the same internal issues. Whether you're Amish, whether you're not Amish, no matter what part of the country, when you face loss, there's the same pain, there's the same questions, and then there's either you're going to find hope or you're not going to find hope. And I love that there's this emotional journey through your books. I can't wait to read more of them to see how you carry that out, because in life, we all face loss. We all face pain. We all face hardship. And I think so much can be learned when we pick up a novel, when we're able to connect with the character and connect with the story. And it might not be the exact same loss, but we can learn as we're going through. So why was that important to you to make it, not just the Amish romance, but make it go deeper so that, yeah, I think readers are impacted in a different way?
Okay, so this is maybe a little deep, but this is my heart.
Mm,
So when I decided I wanted to leave my full-time marketing job and really concentrate on my writing career, I spent a lot of time um, wanting God to talk to me. I
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
him to speak to me. And every time I asked God, you've got to show me what you want me to do, something came to my mind, something from my
Mm,
past. And this is why I decided to write the way I do.
mhm.
One, when I was a young mother, I still lived in Pennsylvania, and one of our Amish neighbors had some mental issues, and he ended up killing his wife.
Mm.
So the community, some of the community um, supported him and supported the Amish community and what they had to go through. But people who didn't know them were very critical that, how could a community that was that close let something like that happen? And it was a division of people who really knew this family, this Amish family, and people who didn't know them that prejudged them. And it really got to my heart that they're just like us. So
Mhm.
what if they practice their religion differently than what we do? They're
Mhm.
still humans. They're still children of God. They're still people who make mistakes, who push things under the rug. They're the same thing. And I was just bent on sharing some of their story to let people know that they're not just some odd cult. That's what a lot of
Right,
people thought.
right.
They were just some odd cult. It's not like that. Everyone, we live in America, and everyone is free to practice their religion whichever way they want. So I wanted to tell my stories in a way that would bring light to that culture.
Mhm.
I knew firsthand what these people struggled with, and I knew what they believed, which was different than what I believed, but
Mhm.
it doesn't make them any different than we are. So that's really what made me start to want to write Amish. And then after I published my first book through a traditional publisher and I was silenced a good bit,
Mm.
I decided to take I fought to get my rights back on that first book. And I went to my marketing. I have a background in marketing. My husband and I have owned a marketing company for about 10, 15 years now. And I took all that knowledge and thanked God for it because he
Yeah.
gave that to me for a purpose and started to self-publish my books so that I could write what I wanted to write
Mhm.
and that I wasn't silenced in what God wanted me to write. So God pretty much tells me what he wants to put in these books, and I just put the words on paper. And whether people will enjoy them or not, um, it's God's story I'm telling, and I just hope that they'll give them a chance. So, did I answer your question? I think I
Yeah.
went off on that a little bit, but really, it was something that happened to my past, to my
Mhm.
Amish neighbor, that really made me start wanting to write and to tell their stories. And I decided to become an indie publisher so that I could really tell the story the way by heart and the way God wanted me to tell things. So,
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned, like, when you were asking God what to write, He brought up these stories from your past. And
mhm,
whenever I teach writing workshops, that's what I talk about. Like, go back, what are highs and lows, either things you've experienced or things that your community experienced? And those are the things you need to write about because God has already been speaking in those areas. They're things that you've been processing, working through with God. And so as you sit down to work in the books, even though they're fiction, it's truth because it's all the things that God has already been teaching you and growing you and that transformation that is happening. So I think that's really what brings books to life. It's not dealing with issues that you don't even understand or don't even really care about, but those things that stirred up something in you that God was working way back then. And then when you think about it and putting it into fiction, it does transform the writing to become real and to become fresh and to become important to the reader. It doesn't seem flat because it was something that you experienced. And so another thing I wanted to mention too is for those who may not be familiar with Old Order Amish, you want to explain just a little bit about that background compared to, I mean, sometimes we see Amish that are going around and they have cell phones, and I've written about Pinecraft and they wear flip flops, and I mean, Old Order is a completely different thing, isn't it?
it is, and they're quite strict. And I will allude to one thing, and you need to read the story so you really understand it. But some, and not all. Let me make that clear.
Hmm.
Some, but not all. Old order communities really frown upon um, reading from an English Bible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Most of the ministers read from a High German Bible, but a lot of the Amish don't even understand High German. They can't read
Yeah.
it. They speak a language called Pennsylvania Dutch. It's a spoken language. It's not a written language, and very few of them learn to read German. In school, they learn English, so they learn to read English. And they speak Pennsylvania Dutch, which is a spoken language, not a written language. So when it comes to reading an English Bible, it's frowned upon.
Mhm.
Old order communities, they're not allowed to evangelize, so they're not allowed to talk to people about Jesus. In fact, they believe that works are going to get them to heaven and that they're not saved by faith. So I introduced that topic a little bit in this series. And like I said, this series is going to be a transformation of this old order community turning into a new order fellowship who follows Christ. So, my first series, Secrets of Willow Springs, was very strict old order. And I had a hard time, and I'll tell you a story. I had a hard time talking about Jesus in that first service or in that
Yeah.
first sermon or that first series because that's not how they communicate. So when I started
Mhm.
to write Emma, I remember the day I was sitting out on my back porch. I had my laptop on my lap, and my daughter who lives next door came over, and I said, her name is Laura. I said, honey, I am just really struggling with this series. How can I talk about Jesus in an old order community? And she looked me square in the eye and she said, Mama, how can you claim to be a Christian if you don't spread the gospel? Your
Mm.
ministry is your writing. You need to spread the word of Jesus. And it slapped me across the face like
Wow.
you could not believe. Mama, how can you claim to be a Christian if you're not spreading the word of Jesus? So it changed. I mean, I was like 4 or 5 chapters into Emma, scratched it, ripped it up, deleted
I
it,
love that.
started completely over. And it was like a light bulb that I was going to change this very strict old order community into a community that relied on
Mhm.
Jesus. And that's what
Yep.
I've done. So it's going to take me a few books. In fact, Emma has a real struggle with her father, who is a minister.
Mhm.
So they actually get excommunicated in Rebecca, the second book. They get excommunicated, and she has no contact. Emma and Rebecca are sisters, and Rebecca's twin sister is Anna. So the first 3 books are of the Byler sisters, and they get excommunicated by their father, and it causes a lot of strife in the community. But their love for Jesus is stronger than their love for their father, their earthly father. So that's
Yeah.
all I'm going to.
It's so good, and to know that this really does happen too. I have
It does.
friends
Hmm.
that were old order Amish, and he had to preach, and he didn't read German, and he's like, "How am I going to preach?" And he got an English. He snuck an English Bible and started reading it, and their lives were completely transformed. They are,
Hmm.
in fact, I'm sitting here right now. There's a quilt on my lap. I'm going to hold it up real quick. My friend Irene made this quilt. She's my
Oh,
uh, Amish friend, a former Amish friend, that they are just the most excited people for Jesus. They'll just anyone they meet, they're going to tell them about Jesus because he's done such a transformation. So what I love is that you're using the story arc as a story arc, but this happens in real life too. There
it does.
is real transformation, just like in any other walk of life. There's real transformation when we discover the relationship with Jesus is about relationship and not about works. And I think even
Hmm.
those who grew up in church, like my mom became a Christian when I was in second grade, and for so many years I'm like, I got to do this, I can't do this, I got to do
Hmm.
this, and then once I realized, like, oh, it's just about walking with Jesus, and the more in love I am with Him, I don't want to do those other things. It changes everything. So I love that you're carrying this character arcs with multiple characters through these stories. That this is really things that happen. These are real life
It does. It does.
transformation. Yeah.
It does. And I'll have to tell you, so my husband and I attended a Mennonite church for about 5 years. Our best friends are Mennonite. I have a friend in Pennsylvania who is old order Amish, and Emma's story is actually written about her. She lost a
Mm,
baby, so she was able to tell me, some of the struggles she faced
mhm.
in her community, where very privately she told me some
Yeah.
of the struggles that she had without with not being able to express her loss the way she
Mhm.
wanted to. And then I have friends in Wisconsin who are also in an old order Amish community. And believe it or not, I have not been able to share this book with her
Mm.
because they are old order and I do not want to offend them. And again, my daughter Laura said, Mom, maybe you're supposed to share this book with her. Maybe you're the one who's going to bring her to Jesus. But I, I, I have not been able to do that yet. But
Yeah.
I'm going to go visit her this summer. So maybe I can feel her out a little bit.
Yeah.
But so my life is surrounded with that
Mhm.
culture. So I have a firsthand
Yep.
knowledge of what it is to be Mennonite, what it is to come from an old order Amish community. I did send my first series to my friend in Wisconsin. Her and her young daughters absolutely loved it and want more, but I have not sent them this new series yet. But yeah, so there we
We'll
go.
see this summer. What's gonna
Yeah.
happen this summer? I
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
not
you're
sure.
personal about that too.
I am. In fact, I am going to go and have a sister's day with my friend in Wisconsin, which I get to finally meet some of her family. So I'm pretty excited about that. That quilt on my back wall up there comes from my friend, and that's what she does. She does quilts. So we're surrounded, and those are special things that come from your friendships that you just they just mean the world to me. Just mean the world to
Absolutely.
me. Mhm.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's so amazing to see that those friendships, at first, I got to know my friends just because they were willing to tell me their stories and tell me their life changes,
Mhm.
and now they're just my friends. Like, I'm just
Mhm.
so excited that we could have that relationship, and my friends live in Montana in a very rural area that I'm like, I would love to go back and see them. So when you're saying you're gonna go visit your friend, I'm like jealous over here, like, ah, like,
Well, I believe it or not, I talk to her husband more than I talk to her. I help her sell some of her quilts on an
mm,
Etsy shop that I did for her, and she's not so comfortable on the phone as her husband, but her husband owns a cabinet shop, so he'll call me, when he has a question about an order or something like that. But we tease back and forth. But they're the same as we are. We have a
exactly,
good time on the
exactly.
phone. We talk about the weather in the garden and what he's up to. And when my friend doesn't want to come out of the house because it's too cold, he makes her go he she makes him go call me. So
Oh, I love
they
it.
they have a phone in his cabinet shop, so I'm able to communicate with them. But wonderful people. But again, they're just like the friends or the neighbors
Yep,
that I have next door. So people sort of put them on a pedestal, and they really don't need to, because they're just
yeah,
like us. They have
exactly.
struggles with their children, and they even have struggle with addiction and all of the things that our families and our children
Yep,
struggle with. Their families and their children struggle with the same thing. So
yep.
I bring a lot of that to light in this particular series, that they're just Americans just like us.
Yeah, I
They
love it.
just dressed a little different, and they don't drive cars, so
That's right.
but they're just like us.
Oh, so good. Okay, so many things I'm gonna talk about, but I do want to make sure we get time to talk about your podcast. So
Okay.
tell us a little bit about that, because I think people that are saying, "Yes, I can't wait to read this," and all her other books, there's more. There's more that Tracy's doing that you'll want to
There
hear.
is, there is. So, like I alluded to a few minutes ago, I have a marketing background. My husband and I have owned a marketing business for a really long time, and I just retired from that in December, and I just handed off my last client like 2 weeks ago to a new company. So I am pretty excited about not having to do
Yeah.
to do to do two jobs anymore. But because of my marketing background and how I love to help other authors, which
Mhm.
I get to help you here this summer, I'm excited about that. I started a Buggy Talk podcast. And just like that, Buggy Talk podcast, you can put that into your browser's address window and do a search on Buggy Talk podcast, and you will come to my website, where I interview other Amish fiction authors and all the great stories they add to the Amish landscape. So on the podcast, I usually publish one a week or one every couple weeks, and it's usually about authors that are launching a new book, but I get really I get to become, or I get to know them a little more because
Yeah.
I ask
Yeah.
them about their writing career and what inspired them to write, and a little bit about the story. It's just a great way to hear about some of your favorite Amish fiction authors. And if you go to Buggy Talk Podcast, you'll see there's like maybe 45 to 50 interviews out there right now. I started it late last fall, and it has been just growing by leaps and bounds. And like I said, I get to interview you, Trisha,
Yeah.
in August about one of
Can't
your
wait.
Amish series that you just
Mhm.
re-released. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then I also do some Facebook Lives, maybe like one a month, where I interview some authors, and I'm really excited. Have you ever heard about the men of fiction or the men of Amish fiction? Have you heard that?
No, no.
No? Okay. So there are a group of, I think, 7 or 8 men who write Amish fiction, and
That
I
is
am
so
due
cool.
I know, it's so cool. I'm so excited about it. So, in the first week of May, which I think it's like May 4th, I think it's on a Wednesday night, I am doing a Facebook Live with the men of Amish
That is
fiction,
so
which is
cool.
so cool. So I'm going to do a Facebook Live, and I will put it all over Facebook. I'd love, if you, whoever's watching this podcast, you can do a search on my name on Facebook and just follow Tracy Fredrychowski, author, and I'll put a link there and put some public notices up about
Good.
that live event. But yeah, it should be really fun. People don't realize, but there are men authors who write
Yeah.
Amish fiction. So I've had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of them on the Buggy Talk podcast. But again, I'm going to do a Facebook Live here the first week in May, which should be really exciting.
That is so cool, and there's a lot of men that read Amish fiction.
There are, there
When I
are.
go speak at conferences, one of my neighbors down the street, his wife gets copies, but she says her husband always reads them way before her, and he just will read like one in an evening and just read the whole book, and he enjoys them so much, and so I think it's so fun to know that. I love that so much. I will definitely be sharing that too.
Thank you,
Um,
thank you.
so cool. And so we have the podcast and then Facebook Lives, and then writers are also readers. So I would just love to hear, and people love to hear kind of what you enjoy. So what are some Christian fiction books that you've been enjoying lately?
Okay. Well, I have an awful habit of when I find a writer or I find an author, I usually just binge everything
Yep,
they've
yep.
written until I'm done, until they don't have anything new. So right now I am binging Francine Rivers. I am just really
Yep.
enjoying her story. And as I was telling you before we started to hit the live button, Francine, I know her movie Redeeming Love just came out, and I enjoyed the book so much that I did not go to watch the movie, mainly because I didn't want to ruin my experience. But you
Yeah.
said that the movie was great. But the book for me was hard to read. There were some spots in it that
It
really
and the
touched my
movie has
heart.
some hard stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just didn't know if I could. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I know I'd bawl like crazy and
Yeah.
embarrass myself. So I didn't go see the movie, but I thoroughly enjoy Francine Rivers. And then
Mm.
I'm really getting into um, Debbie Goose Giusti. Her name is Debbie Giusti, and
Okay,
her
so I'm gonna.
latest book, yeah,
How do you
Debbie
pronounce? How do you
Giusti.
spell her last name? I can't see it.
It's Giusti, and it's
Okay.
Giusti. You pronounce it Giusti. And I just interviewed her on the Buggy Talk podcast,
Oh,
but she writes
fun.
Amish suspense. And I have not read any of her books yet, and these are the first two I'm going to try. I'm going away for a writers retreat coming up here in May, and they're making their way into my suitcase. So I'm hoping I can enjoy some of that. But as I was telling Trisha, I don't normally read Amish fiction when I'm writing Amish
Yeah.
fiction, so I'm
Yeah.
not so sure I'll be able to get to it, because the writers retreat, I'm actually right in the middle of writing book 3 of this particular series we're talking about, which is Anna. And I have to say real quick, before we change the subject, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but each one of the books is going to address a different topic. And I know I
Okay.
said, Emma's book was loss. Her and her
Hmm.
husband have gone through a great loss. Rebecca, she's just a bitter little girl that you just want to smack across her face. But
You're so funny. But you're gonna love her by
love
the
her,
end of the
sure,
book,
but you
I'm
are
sure.
going to love her by the end of the book, you sure. And then Anna, which is book 3 that comes out in August, she struggles with fear and anxiety. And
Mm,
who hasn't struggled with fear and anxiety? And
yeah.
who hasn't let Satan tell you that you are defined by that fear and anxiety? I know I
Mhm.
have. In
Yeah.
my past, I was filled with anxiety and fear until I found Jesus. And then, I lay it at his feet and I walk away. I lay it at his feet and I walk away because fear is not going to get us any closer
Mhm.
to heaven.
That's
So
right.
Anna is all about fear and anxiety, but I'm going to approach it. Like I said, it's a 10-book series. So I'm going to talk about adoption. And Trisha,
Mm.
you might be able to be a good resource for me.
Yeah.
I have a Mennonite friend who adopted two boys. So she's going to help me with that story. I'm going to approach mental illness. I'm going to
Mhm.
approach trouble in a marriage. You wouldn't think that the Amish struggle with marital issues, but they do just like we do.
Yep, yep.
So I'm going to approach that. I'm going to talk about lies and what lies do to a relationship. So I have 10. Oh, sickness. One of my
Mm.
stories is going to be about cancer, and so we're going to approach that topic and how that affects a woman. So we're gonna talk about that. So it's just a wonderful series that's real, it's raw, and it's relatable, and that's how I'm penning these stories. So
I love that so much. Okay, do you have all the names? Because we have Emma, Rebecca, Anna. Do you know the rest of the
I
names
do.
for
You
the
know
others?
what? I should have told you this. All right. So if the listeners go to tracy'samishbooks.com, and that's Tracy with a Y, tracy'samishbooks.com, and you scroll to the middle of that page, or you go to my website and scroll to the middle of the homepage, there's a link on there for the novella that starts this series. It's called The Amish Women of
Oh,
Lawrence County. And it's a little snippet. It's just a short story about each of the 10 women I'm going to write about. So if you want to start the series or you want to see what the series is going to be about, go to tracy'samishbooks.com, scroll to the middle of the page, click on the link to download the novella, The Amish Women of Lawrence County, and it will introduce all 10 women to you.
I love that so much. I could tell you're in marketing because that is genius right there. I love it. I cannot wait to go. I'm like, ooh, I gotta find out who these other women are
Yeah,
now.
you
That
are,
is
you are.
awesome. So cool.
And
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, some of the women in that story, it's their story, like from when they were a teenager, like Rebecca's
Mhm.
story. You meet Rebecca in that novella when she's like 17 or 18, and she meets her husband Eli in a strawberry field. So it gives you some background about them before they become an adult.
Mm,
And then Emma's story, she's only 16 in the novella, and here she's a young mother here in this book. So it introduces you to her and her husband Samuel, who were childhood sweethearts. So
yeah,
each one of the stories is going to give you just a little bit of insight on what makes that particular woman tick. So please download that free novella.
that is so
It's the
fun. That
start
is
of the
so
story.
fun to get into there, and then when they come in later, you already know a little bit about them and
Mhm.
a little bit about their personalities. That is so great. I love that. Great. That is so
Thank
fun. Okay,
you.
so I was going to ask you where we can find more information. So you already mentioned your website.
Mhm.
Do you want to give the name again so we have
It
it?
is. You can go to tracyfredrychowski.com, but it's really hard to spell, so people had trouble with that. So
Yeah.
I have the domain tracy'samishbooks.com, and you can that's easy to spell. So you can go there. You can see a list of all of the
Okay.
books that I've written. I do blog a good bit there. You can go see where I blog, and of course, if you download that novella, The Amish Women of Lawrence County, that's going to flip you over and put you on my email list. And then I value my email list
Mm,
more than I value anything else,
yeah.
more than I value my Facebook followers or my Instagram followers. I truly spoil my email list rotten. So you'll want to get on that list. And you can do that by downloading the Women of Amish or the Women of Lawrence County on my homepage at
I love it.
tracy'samishbooks.com.
I love it. And then if they also want to follow you, so they're gonna go get the novella, they're gonna get on your newsletter list. If they also want to follow you on Facebook and Instagram, where can they look to find that?
Okay, you can just do a search on my name, Tracy
Okay.
Fredrychowski, author. I have a private Facebook group that's just for my dedicated readers, and that's called Buggy Talk, Tracy Fredrychowski's private group. And then if you're just interested in listening to some of the podcast and you're a Facebook follower, you can just go to Buggy Talk Podcast. I have a podcast page on Facebook as well. But, just type in my name, you'll find me everywhere. You'll just find me
Absolutely.
everywhere.
Awesome. Well,
If you
Tracy, it's
can
been
spell my name, that
I
is.
know, but right, we'll jot it down and we'll have it on this page and they can come back to the video and see how to spell it. So, yeah,
Okay.
Tracy, thank you so much for being here today. It's so great. Um, Thoroughly enjoying Emma right now. I cannot wait to get more into the series and I'm going to go get that novella because that sounds awesome. But thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcomed, and I look forward to having you on the Buggy Talk podcast. I think in August you're on, so
That's perfect.
we'll
Well,
switch chairs a little bit there.
I love it. I can't wait. Well,
Okay.
thank you
All
so
right.
much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.